The Texas sun blazed mercilessly through the windows of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. John Cooper stood motionless in his desert camo uniform, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. 8 months in Iraq had hardened his features, but his heart raced with anticipation. The familiar sounds of the airport terminal washed over him. Rushed footsteps, rolling luggage, tearful reunions. His eyes fixed on the arrivals area, searching for the familiar blonde hair he'd dreamed of during countless nights in the desert. 3 deployments with special forces had taught him patience, but this moment tested his resolve. He checked his watch again, 2:47 p.m. Sarah's text said she'd be here by 2:30. The delay gnawed at him, a minor irritation he tried to dismiss. A child's laughter drew his attention to a young family nearby. The father, also in uniform, held his daughter high above his head, her giggles echoing through the terminal. The mother watched them with tears of joy streaming down her face. John swallowed hard and looked away. That should have been him and Sarah years ago, but she'd always said the timing wasn't right for kids. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Stuck in traffic. Almost there. Sorry. Sarah's message read. He typed back a quick, "No worries," and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Another 20 minutes crawled by before he finally spotted her. Sarah walked briskly through the sliding doors, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor. Something was different about her. Her hair was shorter, styled in an expensive-looking bob. The simple sundresses she used to wear had been replaced by a sleek business suit. Her smile, once warm and genuine, now seemed practiced, like a realtor's promotional photo. "John," she called out, her voice carrying none of the enthusiasm he'd imagined during those long nights overseas. He stepped forward, arms opening for an embrace that felt more like a business handshake. Her body remained stiff, pulling away quickly. The perfume she wore wasn't the vanilla scent he remembered. This was something different, more expensive, more sophisticated. "Welcome home," she said, already checking her phone. "Thanks," he replied, studying her face for any trace of the woman he'd left behind. "The car's in short-term parking," she continued, turning toward the exit. "Let me get your bag." "I got it," John answered, falling in a step beside her. The walk to the car was filled with superficial questions about his flight. Sarah's responses to his answers were distracted, punctuated by the constant buzz of her phone. The sleek black Mercedes was another surprise. "New car?" he asked, running his hand along the polished surface. "The real estate business has been good," she replied with a hint of defensiveness. "I needed something professional to show properties." John nodded, remembering the used Honda she'd been driving when he deployed. The interior of the Mercedes smelled of leather and ambition. As they pulled onto the highway, Sarah launched into a detailed account of her rising success in real estate. "The market's exploding right now," she explained, skillfully weaving through traffic. "I've been closing deals left and right." "That's great," John said, trying to show enthusiasm. "Mike mentioned you've been working with some luxury listings." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel at the mention of his old army buddy. "You've talked to Mike?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Just touched base when I landed in Germany," John replied, noting her reaction. "He's still looking out for everyone's families while we're deployed." Sarah's phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it despite the moving traffic. "Everything okay?" John asked. "Just a client," she said quickly. "Brad needs an update on the River Oaks listing." "Brad?" "My sales manager," she explained. "He's been really helpful with getting me into the luxury market." Something in her tone made John's combat-honed instincts stir. The rest of the drive passed in uncomfortable silence. Their ranch-style home in the suburbs looked different too. The wooden porch swing where they used to spend evenings was gone. In its place stood modern furniture that belonged in a magazine spread. "I did some updating while you were gone," Sarah said, noticing his expression. The old stuff didn't really fit with the neighborhood anymore. Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. The comfortable, lived-in feel had been replaced by a staged perfection. Family photos were conspicuously absent from the walls. "I've been using the house for some client meetings," Sarah explained. "It helps to have the right image." John set his duffel bag down on the immaculate hardwood floor. "I need to shower and change," he said, heading toward their bedroom. "Take your time," Sarah called after him. "I have a few calls to make." The bedroom, at least, still held traces of their old life. His dress uniform hung in the closet where he'd left it. The folded flag from his father's funeral still sat on the dresser. But even here, change had crept in. The bed was different, larger, more luxurious. The simple cotton sheets replaced by high thread count linens. In the shower, John let the hot water wash away the travel grime. His mind worked through the details, analyzing the situation like a mission briefing. 8 months was a long time, he told himself. People change, adapt, grow. But something felt wrong, like the weight of a hidden enemy's eyes on your position. He dried off and changed into jeans and a t-shirt. Sarah's voice drifted up from downstairs, her tone animated and warm. A tone he hadn't heard since his return. Moving silently, years of training taking over, he approached the top of the stairs. "The closing is practically guaranteed," Sarah was saying. "Brad, you're worrying too much." A pause as she listened. "No, he doesn't suspect anything." John's muscles tensed. "He just got back today." Another pause. I know. I can't wait to see you either." A soft laugh that made John's stomach turn. "Yes, tonight. I'll tell him I have a late showing." The familiar ice of combat readiness spread through John's veins. He retreated to the bedroom, moving as silently as he'd approached. His mind was already shifting into operational mode, gathering intelligence, assessing threats, planning countermeasures. The enemy had revealed themselves. Now it was time to prepare for battle. Downstairs, Sarah's voice continued, unaware that everything had changed. John sat on the edge of the bed, his expression hardening into the mask his men had learned to fear. The same look he wore before a high-risk operation. His hands, steady as always, reached for his phone. Time to call in some favors. Time to find out exactly who Brad was, and exactly what had happened while he was defending his country. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows. Sarah's voice had fallen silent. John moved to the window, watching as a neighbor walked their dog past the house. Everything looked normal, peaceful, suburban. But he knew better now. Behind the manicured lawns and perfect facades, a different kind of war was about to begin. And this time, he had the home field advantage. He heard Sarah's footsteps on the stairs. "John," she called out, "I have to show a property this evening." "No problem," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I should probably get some rest anyway." "Don't wait up," she said, the words carrying a double meaning she didn't realize he understood. "I won't," he promised, and for once, he was telling the absolute truth. As soon as her Mercedes pulled out of the driveway, John went to work. The first call was to Mike, his most trusted teammate from Iraq. "Brother," Mike answered on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." "What do you know?" John asked, cutting straight to the point. Mike's silence spoke volumes. "You need to be sitting down for this," he finally said. John looked around the bedroom he'd shared with Sarah for 6 years. "I'm already there," he replied. "Tell me everything." As Mike began to speak, John's world shifted fully into combat mode. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. This was about honor, loyalty, and justice. And John Cooper had spent his entire military career serving justice to those who deserved it. Outside, the sun began to set over suburban Dallas. But for John, a new day was just beginning. A day of reckoning that would change everything. He listened as Mike laid out the intelligence he'd gathered. Every detail was another piece of ammunition in the war to come. Brad Thompson, 42, sales manager at Lone Star Luxury Realty. Divorced twice, both times amid allegations of financial impropriety. See you. Rentley under unofficial investigation by the FBI's white-collar crime division. Suspected of using real estate transactions to launder money for a car smuggling operation. How long? John asked, his voice cold. 6 months, Mike replied. Maybe longer. And Sarah? She's involved in the financial side. Probably doesn't know the full scope. John absorbed this information with the detachment of a tactical assessment. I need documents, he said. Anything you can get me. Already on it, Mike answered. I've got a contact in the FBI's Dallas office. She owes me a favor for my time with joint operations. John moved to the window, watching as lights came on in neighboring houses. Families settling in for the evening. Normal lives untouched by betrayal. One more thing, Mike added. Brad's got a yacht down in Galveston. Takes his special clients there for weekend business meetings. The pieces were falling into place. Send me everything, John said. And Mike. I know, brother, Mike interrupted. This conversation never happened. John ended the call and stood in the growing darkness. His reflection in the window looked different now. Harder, more focused. The man who'd returned from Iraq that afternoon was gone. In his place stood a warrior with a new mission. And this time, failure wasn't an option. The next morning, John sat at the kitchen island with his black coffee untouched. Sarah had returned late, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't meant for a real estate showing. She was still sleeping upstairs, her phone clutched tightly even in sleep. Morning light filtered through the designer curtains she'd bought to replace their old ones. John opened his laptop, his military training shifting seamlessly into digital warfare. First target, Brad Thompson's social media presence. The man lived his life like an open book, flaunting his success for everyone to see. Photos of the yacht Mike had mentioned filled his Instagram feed. Each image showed a different woman, all resembling Sarah in some way. LinkedIn revealed Brad's career trajectory, a series of short-term positions at luxury real estate firms. Each departure coincided with internal investigations that never went public. John's phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Check your secure email. FBI contact came through. The encrypted files painted an interesting picture. Brad Thompson was under investigation for more than just money laundering. The car smuggling operation was connected to a Mexican cartel. Sarah's signatures appeared on several suspicious property transactions. Whether she knew it or not, she had helped launder millions in drug money. John heard movement upstairs. Sarah was awake. He closed the laptop just as she entered the kitchen. You're up early, she said, avoiding his eyes. Never lost the habit, he replied, watching her closely. She poured herself coffee in a designer mug that probab. LY cost more than his first car. I have to head to the office, she said, checking her phone again. Big closing today. With Brad? John asked casually. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she set down her mug. Among others, she answered too quickly. The whole team will be there. The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. John wondered how many other lies had preceded this one. Good luck, he said, managing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah hurried through her morning routine, barely touching her coffee. The Mercedes purred to life in the driveway, carrying her away to her secret life. John waited exactly 30 minutes before making his next move. The call went to a private number in Virginia. Colonel Reynolds, a gruff voice answered. Sir, it's Cooper, John said. I need to cash in that favor. The colonel's response was immediate and supportive. Whatever you need, son. You saved my ass in Fallujah. I need surveillance on a potential cartel operation in Dallas. Commercial or residential? Both. And I need it off the books. Give me the details. John laid out what he knew about Brad's operation. The colonel listened without interruption. You'll have eyes on them by nightfall, he promised. Satellite and ground teams. Thank you, sir. Cooper. Yes, sir. Whatever this is about, watch your six. Always do, sir. The next call was to an old friend at the Texas Rangers. Jack Martinez had been John's roommate at Special Forces training. Now he commanded the Rangers' Financial Crimes Unit. I need everything you have on Lone Star Luxury Realty, John said after pleasantries. That's a hot topic right now, Jack replied. We've been watching them for months. What kind of exposure are we talking about? 8 figures minimum. Property fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. Jack's voice lowered. Your wife's name came up in our investigation. I know, John said flatly. Silence stretched between them. What do you need? Jack finally asked. Time, John answered. Keep the investigation quiet for 2 more weeks. That's all I'm asking. You got it, brother. But John, yeah, don't do anything I'll have to arrest you for. John's laugh was cold. Everything I'm planning is perfectly legal, just extremely unpleasant. The rest of the morning was spent gathering intelligence. John created a detailed timeline of Sarah and Brad's relationship. Every property showing that ran too long. Every late-night client meeting. Every suspicious bank transfer. The pattern was clear and damning. By noon, he had enough evidence to destroy both their careers. But that wasn't enough. This wasn't just about careers or money. This was about betrayal at the deepest level. While he had been dodging bullets in Iraq, leading men into combat, watching friends die, Sarah and Brad had been laughing at him, planning their future together, using his military salary to help fund their illegal operation. John's phone buzzed again. Another text from Mike. You need to see this now. A video file followed. Security camera footage from Brad's office. Sarah was there, sitting on Brad's desk. Their embrace left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Brad's words were clear on the audio. Once the divorce is final, we'll move to Miami. Start fresh with all this beautiful cartel cash. Sarah's laugh was like broken glass in John's ears. He's too stupid to ever figure it out. Too busy playing soldier to see what's right in front of him. John watched the video 3 times. Each viewing crystallized his resolve. His training had taught him to channel anger into focused action, to use rage as a tool, not a master. Now those lessons would serve a new purpose. He opened his laptop again, began composing emails to the FBI, DEA, and IRS. Each one detailed the criminal enterprise, but held back just enough information to keep them hungry. The real evidence would come later, after he had finished his own operation. Sarah texted around 2 o'clock. Working late again? Don't wait up. No problem, he replied. Take care. The double meaning made him smile grimly. Evening found him in the home office, surrounded by printouts and documents, building a case that would stand up in any court. But the legal system would only be part of his revenge. He thought about the young soldier he'd been, marrying his high school sweetheart before his first deployment, believing in love, honor, and loyalty. That soldier was dead now, killed not by enemy fire, but by betrayal on the home front. In his place sat a warrior with a different mission. The sound of a car in the driveway caught his attention. Not Sarah's Mercedes, a government-issue SUV. Mike stepped out, carrying a thick folder. Brother, he said when John opened the door. You ready for this? John welcomed him in without a word. They spread the new intelligence on the dining room table. Photos, bank statements, surveillance reports. They're getting sloppy, Mike observed. Getting confident, John corrected. That's when people make mistakes. What's your play? John outlined his plan with military precision. Mike whistled softly. That's cold, brother. But they deserve it. Yes, John agreed. They do. The plan would take time to execute. But time was now his ally. Every day they spent thinking they were safe was another day he could use to ensure their destruction. The Texas night settled around the house. Somewhere out there, Sarah and Brad were celebrating their imagined victory, believing they had fooled the battle-hardened soldier. They would learn too late how wrong they were. John poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handed one to Mike. "To justice," he said quietly. "To justice," Mike echoed. They drank in silence. Brothers in arms. United once again, in a different kind of war. Outside, surveillance teams took up their positions. Satellites tracked movements and communications. The net was closing, but the targets didn't know it yet. And that was exactly how John wanted it. 3 days passed like a slow-motion tactical advance. John maintained his routine, playing the role of unsuspecting husband. Sarah grew more confident, less careful about hiding her phone, less concerned about explaining her late nights. The surveillance teams reported everything. Every meeting between Sarah and Brad. Every contact with their cartel connections. Every dollar that moved through their fake property deals. On the 4th morning, John initiated Phase 1, an anonymous tip to Brad's wife about his offshore accounts. Within hours, her lawyers had frozen all their joint assets. Brad's first crisis call to Sarah came during her morning coffee. John pretended not to notice her panicked whispers from the next room. By noon, the FBI had received an anonymous package. Detailed evidence of the car smuggling operation, but nothing yet about the money laundering. That would come later. Sarah came home early that day, her face pale with worry. "Everything okay?" John asked innocently. "Just a difficult client," she lied. Her hands shook as she poured herself a large glass of wine. Phase 2 began the next morning. Local news stations received proof of Brad's connections to the cartel. The story broke during the morning traffic report. Sarah's phone buzzed continuously during breakfast. She barely touched her food. "I need to go," she said, nearly running to her Mercedes. John watched her pull away, knowing she was heading to Brad's office, where FBI surveillance teams were already in position. The colonel's assets had proven invaluable. Satellite imagery showed the panic at Lone Star Luxury Realty. People rushing in and out, papers being shredded, hard drives being wiped, all of it documented by multiple agencies. Mike's text arrived exactly on schedule. "DA just moved in. Local news is on site." John turned on the television just in time. Live coverage showed Brad being let out in handcuffs. Sarah was visible in the background, being questioned by agents. Her designer suit couldn't hide her terror. John's phone rang. Sarah's number. He let it go to voicemail, then listened as she begged him to come help her. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Said she could explain everything. He deleted the message without responding. Phase 3 would begin at dinner. John made a reservation at Sarah's favorite steakhouse. Told her he wanted to help sort everything out. She arrived looking devastated but hopeful. Her makeup couldn't hide the day's tears. "John," she began as they sat down, "I can explain everything." "I know you can," he replied calmly. "That's why I invited someone to join us." Right on cue, Jack Martinez walked in. Sarah's face went WH-eyed as she recognized his Texas Ranger badge. "Mrs. Cooper," Jack said, sitting down. "We need to talk about money laundering." John watched as Sarah's world crumbled. Every transaction, every illegal deal, every secret meeting, laid out in perfect detail. "How?" she whispered, looking at John with new eyes. "I'm not as stupid as you thought," he answered. "Not as blind as you hoped. It's time for the truth, Sarah." Tears streamed down her face, ruining her expensive mascara. "Brad said it was just business," she sobbed. "Said we could be rich. Said you'd never understand." "He was right about that last part," John agreed. His voice was cold as desert night. Jack placed a formal document on the table. "You have a choice, Mrs. Cooper. Cooperate fully with our investigation, or face federal charges." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the paper. "What about Brad?" she asked weakly. "Mr. Thompson is facing multiple federal indictments," Jack replied. "The cartel connection alone carries a 20-year minimum sentence." John stood up, straightening his jacket. "I'll see you at the divorce hearing," he said quietly. "Don't bother asking for alimony. The federal asset seizure will take care of that." He walked out without looking back. Sarah's sobs faded behind him. Outside, the Texas night was cool and clear. Stars shone down on a world already changing. His phone buzzed with an update from Mike. Brad was singing like a bird to federal investigators, throwing everyone under the bus to save himself, including Sarah. Phase 4 would ensure it was all too late. The evidence had been carefully structured, layer upon layer of damning proof. No deals would save them now. John drove home to the house that no longer felt like a prison. Tomorrow, he would contact a realtor, start looking for a new place, somewhere far from the memories of betrayal. His father's folded flag sat on the passenger seat, a reminder of honor in a dishonorable world. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Sarah pled guilty to reduced charges, still facing 5 years in federal prison. Brad received 25 years. The cartel connection had sealed his fate. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning. John didn't attend the hearing. His lawyer handled everything. He was already in Colorado by then, looking at property near Fort Collins. Mike had connections with the local VA center. They needed counselors for returning veterans, people who understood what war really meant, both overseas and at home. The mountains offered peace he hadn't known he needed. Clean air and honest people. No fake smiles or hidden agendas. Just truth as solid as the Rocky Mountains. His new cabin sat on 5 acres of pine forest, far from the artificial world of luxury real estate. Here, a man's word still meant something. Honor wasn't an outdated concept. He still received updates from Jay. The case had led to multiple cartel arrests. Sarah was serving her time in a minimum security facility. Brad had been transferred to federal prison in Louisiana. Their empire of lies had crumbled completely. John sat on his cabin's porch, watching the sunset, a cup of coffee steaming in his hands. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and freedom. Tomorrow, he would start his new job at the VA, helping other warriors find their way home, teaching them that some battles don't end overseas, that victory sometimes means walking away, and that honor, in the end, was its own reward. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from Mike. "You did good, brother. The war is over." John smiled and turned off his phone. The stars were coming out over the Rockies. A new chapter was beginning, and this time, he was ready for peace.